Welcome to another episode of the Successful Encore Career. This time we're spotlighting the 2018 Senior Career Expo Employer Training Program. This episode brought to you by Palmer-Donavin, Central Ohio Area Agency on Aging, Nationwide Insurance, and Innosource. I'm Brett Johnson, longtime volunteer with Employment for Seniors, and with me is Carol Ventresca.
Hi, Brett. Thanks so much for being with me today, too. And we're going to have a great program featuring Shawn Richard, who is the Vice President of Human Resources for Palmer-Donavin. Now, for our listeners who have not heard of Palmer-Donavin, it's a building materials distributor here in Central Ohio. It's an employee-owned business. And when I say building materials distributor, I'm going to let Shawn explain that. But I understand that they know the Lowe's and Home Depot folks very well. So it's going to be a great program. Shawn's been with Palmer-Donavin for 21 years. And it's a great story. Started out as a student, a college student, getting his first summer job. And 21 years later, he's now the vice president. So this is a wonderful career stretch that he's had. And we're going to hear more about it, but particularly a program that he's been running at Palmer-Donavin. So, Shawn, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
This is going to be a great information session for all of our listeners. We're excited to share this information because it's something that's very, very different. But before we get into the program that you're doing at Palmer-Donavin, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Sure. So in 1997, I was actually a college student looking for a summer job, and I happened to see the Palmer-Donavin sign. I was familiar with them because I used to work for a customer back in my hometown of Anna, Ohio. So I went back to apply for a job, and thankfully, a day later, I got a call that I had been hired. So I was very excited to have work for the summer. And as the summer was coming to an end, I talked to my boss about whether or not I could continue working while I went back to college. And at that time, I was going to the Franklin University, pursuing a degree in accounting. And they thankfully worked with my schedule to move me to night shift so that I could go to school during the day. And an interesting thing, I found that the more hours I worked, the better my GPA got.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. There were fewer times or less time for distraction, I suppose.
Yes.
So it really forced me into time management. But over time, I continued pursuing my degree, and I had several managers at Palmer-Donavin asking me what I planned to do upon graduation. And you know, being the punk that I was, I said, I'm going to go to the highest bidder.
There you go. Makes sense,
yeah.
Yes.
Just wanted to make that clear.
I'm sure
right
Franklin University wants to hear their alumni say that, too. That's good.
Right. But thankfully, they continued working with me. And as I was approaching graduation, a job opened up in payroll. So I applied for that job and got it. And that job then morphed into human resources. So a couple of years into my career, I found I had an accounting degree with no accounting experience and human resources experience with no degree.
Right.
So I made the decision to go back to the Ohio State University and pursue a master's in human resources, which I completed in 2008.
Wonderful.
So I've had an opportunity to grow with Palmer-Donavin from day one. And when people ask me for career advice, I just tell them, I can tell you my story. I don't know if it's going to be your story or not.
But I think those stories are incredible because you are a perfect example of networking. You knew what Palmer-Donavin did because you had that experience when you were in your hometown. And then networking within Palmer-Donavin itself, talking to all of those managers, helping you in your career path. That's an incredible example.
Yeah, it certainly helps to have a good company and a good manager to start your career.
Wonderful. Great.
Well, about the company, 100-year-old company based here in Columbus. It's a wholesale distributor for building materials. Talk about the success of Palmer-Donavin and the challenges in the industry.
Sure. So as you mentioned, it's a wholesale distributor of building materials. So if you think about that, our industry is under constant pressure and constant change. So in 2008, we had the housing crash, and shortly thereafter, Amazon entered the scene. So on both the housing side and the distribution side, there's tremendous upheaval in the industry. But despite all of the turmoil, Palmer-Donavin's managed to be very successful, in part because we're an employee-owned company. Our employees are engaged to a degree that most workforces simply aren't. Being employee-owned doesn't mean that we get to vote on every decision that's made in management, but we do get the benefit of the profits made by the company. So I personally benefit from Palmer-Donavin being more profitable, and that changes the way our employees work and the way they approach the work. So it's with that culture that I think we've been able to weather the storm and be incredibly successful. So in 2007, our shareholders sold to the employees. So we've been an ESOP now for a little over 11 years. And at that time, we had about 250 employees in locations, mostly in Ohio, with one in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Today, we have over 500 employees, and we have 8 facilities from Minneapolis to Lansing, Michigan, to Cincinnati. So we have done that against the backdrop of a very tumultuous housing industry and, frankly, a distribution industry that's been largely disrupted by Amazon.
Now, would you have ever thought that Amazon was ever going to be a part of a discussion as a competitor?
Not at all. What's interesting is, the way that Amazon disrupts our business is different than you might expect. So the materials that we carry are large, bulky items. They're really not conducive to an Amazon distribution center. But they hire people in such mass that it really impacts the labor market every place we're located.
Interesting.
So much so that now warehousing jobs actually command more pay than manufacturing jobs in most cases.
It's amazing, but we have heard that from other employers when everyone in town is excited about companies coming in. They don't see that as a positive. They see that as, it's going to even be harder to find people.
Right.
And part of our work at Employment for Seniors is to help our clients understand that, yes, employers need you. Yes, they need talented, skilled, experienced people, but their job is to make sure an employer knows what they can do. And so that's where we try to get help the employers throughout Central Ohio find great applicants, regardless of whether Amazon's in our backyard or not. There are a lot of people, and so we just need to try to get them to you.
Yes,
so that's
yeah.
good. So, Shawn, back in, I think it was February, there was this incredible article in Columbus Business First on Palmer-Donavin. And your CEO was talking about this. The VP at HR kept telling me we needed to do this, and suddenly an Emerging Leaders program had been created and was implemented. And so that's why we are talking to you today as part of learning more about emerging leaders, but also that you're going to be with us at our 2018 Career Expo as our featured speaker for the employers. And so this is going to be great information. So let's go ahead and get started talking a little bit about emerging leaders. Sort of, what were the issues that you were facing that you were even looking for a program like this?
Sure. So as the Vice President of Human Resources, it's my job to make sure that we have the right people with the right skills at the right time to execute our strategy. So we're a growing business in a very labor-intensive industry at a time of great labor pressure. So being able to keep up with demand at all levels of the company is very important for us. In addition to that, the jobs that we have at Palmer-Donavin require a tremendous amount of knowledge and skill to do. So although we're in distribution, this is not a typical pick-pack warehouse operation. It can many times take years of experience to be able to differentiate subtle differences between products and product lines. So we decided that basically, in order for us to meet the growing demands on just that we're facing with the labor market and demographics in general, we needed to have a way to develop employees in-house on our own. So in addition to the knowledge required, our ESOP has also created a very unique culture at Palmer-Donavin. So we put a lot of effort into screening applicants to make sure they not only have the knowledge and skills required to do the job, but that they will fit in our culture. And they have that sense of ownership when they walk through the door. One thing I always tell employees and even candidates is if you watch our CEO walk into work in the morning, he will stop and pick trash up out of the parking lot. And unfortunately, that's pretty unique in this day and age. And, we just have a very humble, very service-oriented culture that we need to screen tightly for.
Okay.
So what impact has the Emerging Leaders Program had on recruiting and retention?
Yeah, so honestly, when we created the Emerging Leaders Program, I really wasn't looking to impact recruiting or retention. However, once we kicked off the program, we realized that applicants are very interested in finding out what this is all about. Another interesting thing is the fact that we've had to change our recruiting process. And that is simply in response to the labor market. So now it's us selling our job to applicants much more so than applicants selling their services to us. And they are very highly motivated about training and development plans in the company. When I talk to candidates, I certainly share my story with them about starting in the warehouse and working my way up to a vice president. But if I can't share with them a tool to help them do the same thing, it sort of sounds like that worked 20 years ago, but it's not going to work today sort of thing. Right. The Emerging Leaders Program really makes that tangible, and it makes our commitment to employee development much more real for them.
You developed this in-house, grassroots, or did you have some examples in the industry's best practices to do this?
So one thing Palmer-Donavin does very well is work with interns. So we actually had an intern on staff at that point who came from Ohio University, who has an Emerging Leaders Program already developed. So I was talking with her about my intention of developing an Emerging Leaders Program. And so she had some basic examples of what OU was doing and suggestions on additional topics that we could work into our program. We've also gotten vendor sponsorship for the program, and they've provided money but also resources and suggestions, which has been incredibly helpful. Most of what we've done is develop content or really procure content that's readily available. So I'm not writing a series of business books for the program. We just take what the best that's available currently and share that.
Absolutely, which we had shared earlier, that my firm belief is you don't recreate the wheel.
Exactly.
Use the wheels that are out there that are working well. So we've talked a whole lot around the program. Why don't you give us some of the details of the Emerging Leaders Program?
Sure. So with the Emerging Leaders Program, it's specifically designed to build bench strength to accommodate our demographic issues going forward. So I can tell you as the Vice President of Human Resources that in the next 20 years, we are facing a significant brain drain in the workforce at all levels. So we wanted a program that would ready people for leadership positions. So we're looking very specifically for those employees on staff that are high potential employees. They have to actually be referred by their manager to get into the program. Once they're in the program, they get to choose a mentor, also from the ranks of senior management, who will work with them throughout the course of the program. It is a year-long program, and we meet at least once a month, 2 hours at a time. In addition to that meeting time, there are also group projects that require them to meet with each other. So it's really a good cross-section of the company. So we get employees from all 8 branches at all levels of the organization and in all different departments. So they are working side by side across different divisions, across different departments on very specific problems that they're charged with solving. We focus on public speaking and just the ability to run a meeting and present facts to an audience. We focus on things like crucial conversations, reading financial statements. One of our board members actually does a session on corporate governance, which is incredibly important for an employee-owned company.
Good.
And these are skills or learning that they've not really been exposed to up to this point in their career.
Shawn, it's kind of a chicken and the egg. You have to convince leadership to let people put time into, I'm assuming this is working time for the most part, put working time into something that's sort of special. And until it's successful, how did you convince them to give this a chance?
Sure. So one of the beauties of Palmer-Donavin is just something that I've always really appreciated about the company is the ability to hide in plain sight, right?
there you go.
Rather than asking for permission to create a program like this, we were able to kind of do it on the sly. And we built the program and then really rolled it out to the CEO and asked him, well, what do you think? And he immediately loved it. So once I got Ron Calhoun's support for the program, selling it to the rest of the company was pretty easy. And I would say that managers at Palmer-Donavin are committed to employee development. They understand how important it is in a flat organization to develop employees internally. So the resources, procuring the resources, getting people to spend time in the program has really not been a challenge for us.
You know, I think that's one of the things that went by the wayside in the recession is all of those wonderful in-house training opportunities that we all had. I retired from Ohio State. I mean, you can't get more training opportunities than you could on a university campus, and I didn't realize how spoiled I was until I came to Employment for Seniors. But it really hasn't come back. Employers keep telling us, I don't have time to train, I don't have time to train. But I think you're showing a perfect example where a little tiny bit of time makes a huge difference at the end of the process.
Yeah, that's where I kind of fall back on my accounting education as well. So built into this program, we have something akin to bring your own problem to work day. So throughout the course of the program, in these groups, they are expected to present and solve problems that the business is facing for the express purpose of making the program self-sustainable. So we are proving out ROI in the program as we go through the program. In addition to that, they're required to pitch a business case to the executive team at the completion of the program and ask for permission to implement their plan.
Interesting.
So this is not an academic exercise. This is very specifically an in-house training program designed to impact the business.
Sort of Shark Tank.
Sure.
It's really, you know, it is. It's not just, it's not an exercise, an academic exercise. It's also not a made-up exercise for your company. It's real-life work issues of the moment that you're able to fix or at least get on the right path while, again, helping your clients, your employees.
Yes, and it becomes symbiotic because adult learners tend to learn better when they're able to immediately apply the concepts that you're teaching them. And it just makes it a little more tangible for them, and then the business is benefiting as a result.
Okay.
That makes a lot of sense of why the bar is so high to enter a recommendation from management, such that you get to really see the skills, the energy, the forward thinking to be a part of this.
Right.
Wonderful.
So changing gears a little bit, do you see differences in recruiting and retention issues for a company that differ depending on the population of applicants, for instance, as we talk about older adults here of their age?
Certainly, yeah. So across our organization, as I mentioned, we have 8 facilities. Each of the 8 facilities has its own unique labor market. So we have to account for that. Within each labor market, there are differences based on age, education, employment background. So we see all of that, and what we've done to accommodate that is really we've built in a pretty flexible onboarding process. So when we are onboarding a new employee now, the recruiter checks in with that employee at the end of the first week and asks them things like, did your manager meet you at the door on your first day? What do you most remember about your first day on the job? Do you trust the people that you work with? Are you comfortable asking questions? Those types of things. And we find large differences between age groups there. It is interesting because younger employees are typically more comfortable asking questions than older employees.
Yeah.
And yet older employees are more comfortable voicing concerns than younger employees.
Interesting. Okay.
So we have found as an employer that when we hire people 25 years old or younger, they're a significantly higher flight risk than older employees. In part, I think that's just a function of where they're at in their life. The cost of failure when you're 23 is significantly less than it is
Correct.
if you're 53.
Sure, absolutely.
So they are more prone to moving across the country on very short notice. So that is something that we've had to account for as well.
Shawn, when you're talking about the retention and recruiting issues for the employees that you have right now, you had also mentioned before we started the program a little bit about your recruiting efforts and what Palmer-Donavin is looking for in new applicants. So I think one message I think I'm hearing is age is not necessarily an issue. It's what you're really looking for is fit, knowledge, experience, willing to do the job, those kinds of issues. So maybe would you like to take an opportunity to tell us a little bit about your recruiting practice and what you're looking for in applicants?
Sure. So I will tell you, the labor market is so tight right now. I'm not sure how any employer, even if they had the desire to, could look at age as necessarily a way to weed people out. And I'll give you an example of that. As a distributor, we have our own trucking fleet. So if you're not familiar with the trucking industry, right now, nationwide, it's estimated to be 51,000 unfilled CDL truck driver positions.
Yes.
If you look at demographics of people with their CDL, they are overwhelmingly over 50 years old. So this is a problem today. It's going to be a massive problem tomorrow and really from this point going forward. So when we are looking for employees, we are looking for a couple of things. Number one, we want employment stability. I've been with Palmer-Donavin for 21 years, and that is actually very typical in our company. Actually, most of our executive team has that level of tenure and more, and you will find that in our warehouse as well. So stability is very important to us because it takes so long to develop the knowledge and skills required to do the job. Another thing that we're looking for are proven results. So when we are in interviews with employees, we're not asking them to tell us what results they've gotten. We're asking them to show us what results they've gotten and explain how they got those results. We also have a really robust reference checking process.
Right.
So we ask at a minimum that they put us in touch with 3 people that we choose from their employment history to speak with. And beyond that, it's taking responsibility for failure. So we ask people with every job that they've had, what is the biggest mistake that you made? What led to the mistake? And what did you learn from it? And I am always amazed at how many people have never made a mistake throughout the course of their entire career.
Incredible, isn't it? Yes, yes.
I'm thinking it too myself.
Yes, it's like, you recruiters, you're all alike. You want to know what my weaknesses are.
Right.
In this labor market, it's so tight now that we've had to get away from posting jobs and waiting for people to apply. So instead, we are going out and finding them using tools like LinkedIn Recruiter and Indeed Resume database searches. So these are tools that allow us to enter really complex filters to find very specific people that we're looking for. So we can target companies, we can target careers, we can target universities, years of experience, specific experiences, that sort of thing to find the candidates that we're looking for.
When you're looking at the filtering process, though, do you see that as a negative at all? A lot of times we get, from my side of the table, we're getting the impression that employers are filtering so minutely that they're sort of missing the trees for the bigger forest?
I will tell you, it depends on how you do it. We do not have the luxury of getting that wrong. So, and many times if you do get it wrong, you will know because your filter results will give you 2 candidates and they both live in New Jersey.
Right.
So
Right.
We put a lot of time and effort into how we're going to filter and it depends on the position as well. I know that's been an issue with, it's basically academic inflation. where we now are requiring a master's degree for a job that probably only has a requirement of maybe an associate's degree.
Really?
So that's pretty common. I hear that a lot from recruiters. We make sure that we do not do that. I will tell you, very few positions at Palmer-Donavin require a bachelor's degree.
Okay. And that was a result of the recession that we saw from our end. Folks who had worked up the ladder to become directors, supervisors, officers in an organization in an area that they had tons of experience but no degree.
Right.
And then when the recession hit, it was almost impossible for them to get back into their career field, let alone at the level where they had been.
Right.
So, because the degrees were being used as a filter.
We were actually able to pick up a lot of really good employees during that downturn because we had the luxury of continuing to grow. You might remember there was a hurricane that came through central Ohio.
Right. Oh, yes.
When hurricanes come through Ohio, people need a lot of vinyl siding and roofing, which just happens to be our niche.
And blue plastic tarps.
Yes, right. Yeah. Unfortunately, we weren't in the tarp business.
There you go. I do remember those.
But you know a guy.
Yes, right. Exactly.
Exactly. Well, also at the top of this program, I had mentioned that you are going to be joining us at our Senior Career Expo. And for the listeners, the expo is August 23rd at Fawcett Center on the Ohio State University campus here in Columbus. And if you're an employer and you would like to find incredible talent, that's the place to be. But we're running out of space, so you better contact us pretty quickly at 614-863-1219, my shameless plug. But if you're a job seeker, then you also want to come to the expo because we are going to have 70 or more great recruiting employers like Palmer-Donavin, who is joining us this year. One of the special programs for employers during our Career Expo is an early morning breakfast. And as I mentioned, have food, they will come. But we try to provide some added benefit to the employers by having a guest speaker, and Shawn is our guest speaker this year, so you're going to be with us at the expo. Maybe give us a couple of highlights of what you're going to talk about. Don't tell everybody the secrets because we want them to show up for breakfast, but a couple of good things that you're going to provide them that day.
Sure. So we're going to be talking about how Palmer-Donavin leverages our training and development in recruiting and retention efforts with our employees. And in a flat organization, how you can use training and development also to create your own bench strength and your own succession plan internally. I think there is a misconception that most companies do not have time to put together a robust training and development program. Most of these materials are readily available online. It's just a matter of assembling them and then using that when you're talking to candidates. So by going out and finding candidates or leveraging our training and development in recruiting, we set the expectation for continuous learning even before that candidate accepts a job offer. They understand that's going to be something that we talk about from day one forward. And it really has been a game changer for our culture, and so that's what I'm going to talk about.
Wonderful. That's great. Shawn, thank you so much for joining us today.
You.
We're going to be getting this information out to the employers who've already signed up for our Career Expo, and any employer who is interested in hearing more from Shawn, you need to sign up and come and recruit at the Career Expo. Give me a call. You can get more information on the Expo at the Employment for Seniors website at www.employseniors.org. And thank you again for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Successful Encore Career Podcast presented by Employment for Seniors and sponsored by Central Ohio Area Agency on Aging, Nationwide Insurance, and Innosource. This podcast is available on our website, employseniors.org, as well as the Apple Podcasts app on your iPhone, the Podbean app you can download free on your Android phone, YouTube, or your favorite podcast player. To help us defray the cost of producing the podcast, consider donating. Go to employseniors.org and click on the Donate Now button. Any amount is appreciated, and we'll make sure to thank you for your support in an upcoming podcast episode.
Employment for Seniors is the premier resource linking mature adults with employment opportunities. If you are 50 years of age or older and living in Central Ohio, we are here to help you find employment. and Central Ohio employers, our mature, talented, skilled, and dependable job seekers will provide significant value to your organization. Follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. If you have a topic or an interview idea, let us know. Send us an email at podcast@employseniors.org.
Circle270media.com